What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the RunPureSports and Sabersim with Jordan every single Thursday. Usually it's 8 p.m. Jordan, 1 p.m. Eastern, breaking down all the goods with Sabersim. And I'm very excited for today because we're going to kick off. I've been using Sabersim. I think I know most of the products, but Plague and Chad asked in the Sabersim package to go over the entry editor, a very easy way to upload all your lineup just through Sabersim. So we're going to go through that right away to start. And I don't know, like I said, I've done the old-fashioned way. The CSV takes a little longer. So excited for Jordan to break that down. And he's also going to introduce the new League of Legends and NASCAR model that Sabersim put out. I'm very excited for that. NASCAR, I mean, Daytona just had a milli maker. NASCAR content's really good over here. Can use Sabersim package and League of Legends too. There's a lot of like stacking that goes involved in League of Legends, kind of like hockey, as you guys, if you played that over the All-Star break. Baseball, you need the teams that win, that correlate and stuff like that. So excited to dive into that as well. Jordan, how's it going over there? It's my first time at the show with you. How's your day going so far?
It's good, man. I'm excited to be back. Excited to dive in here. And yeah, I mean, we were talking just a couple minutes before we went live, and I saw that question come in with the entry editor, and I think that's a great place to start. So we'll go ahead, I guess, and just jump right into it. So the entry editor here lives in this entries tab up in the upper left in the app. And honestly, I cannot stress enough. We'll see it in a second, but how useful this is. I really recommend anybody using Sabersim already use this every single time you're playing DFS, just because it saves a ton of time. And the biggest thing is it really reduces the risk of errors that can come up right up against lock. I feel like everybody that's played DFS for a while has at some point or another messed up their CSV with like 60 seconds before lock, and then everything's all out of whack. So this will really help avoid that. And we make it super easy. So I've got the DraftKings NBA slate up for tonight. I know I'm registered for a couple entries here for tonight. So you can go in here and just click this download template file from DraftKings. And as long as you're already registered, as long as you're already reserved entries or have some dummy lineups in there, this will just automatically go and download the entries file to your computer.
Cool.
So click OK there. And then what I can do is actually just drag this over. And what it'll do is it's going to pull in my entries file for tonight's slate. So just give it a second to load here. Get my contest coming up here. So I've got a handful of different entries here for tonight. And we've got everything here on the right, all of the different contests. This information all just comes directly from the entries file. So how many entries you've got, the buy-in, the type, which I think is pretty cool, and title. I know you said you play some cash games. So I think this will be kind of useful for you. But I'll show you kind of how this works at the most basic level here first. So first thing we need to do is build some lineups. So we'll just go ahead and get some lineups going. I'm not going to mess with the settings too much or anything here. I just want to make sure I got 150 because I'm in the mini here. So we'll go ahead.
Most of the people should know this setup right here. If you don't, if you guys have any questions about it, but most people should know the step 2 process by now.
Yeah, for sure. And for anybody that has any questions about anything I'm doing, any part here, just let me know.
Just we'll put in YouTube chat or the live show chat in Discord, either place, and we'll get to your questions that way.
Awesome. Cool. So we got a build here wrapping up. And we'll go ahead, give this just a second to load here. We got our lineups.
It's always a little slower when you screen share and it's on the show and all that. We understand.
For sure. Cool. So we got our lineups here. So let's just bounce back to the entry tab here. And then we make this as easy as possible. So like the one-click version, if you don't want to make any edits to your lineups at all you're going to do is once you have a build done is you can go up here and click Fill Contest with Lineups. And what this is going to do is it's going to show you click this, all of your builds. So in this case, I've got the lineup set I just built here, and then a couple different fill methods of basically how do you want to put these lineups into your contest. So quick explanation of what these are. The rank fill method is going to put the number 1 lineup in your lineup build into every single contest you have. So in this case, it's going to fill my single entries. It's going to be the first lineup into my 20s and my 150, right? And then the second overall lineup is going to go in, and it's the single entries are filled at that point, but the second lineup is going to go into the 20s and the 150s and so on. We also have a unique fill method. So in this case, like let's say I've got 215 total entries. If I built 215 lineups instead, and I just wanted a unique lineup in everything, I could use the unique fill. And then the exact match is only going to fill a contest if the number of entries you have in the contest matches the lineups you have exactly. So in this case, with a 150 lineup build, all it would fill here would be the mini max because nothing else has 150. But for this, I think the easiest example, I'll just use the rank fill. We'll click apply.
And that rank's going off like the Saber score that's already first in your 150 that it generated, correct?
Exactly. Yep. Cool. So it's just the sorting of the lineups in the build. And you can see here now all of a sudden it says like these are all filled with the lineups. It says you use the rank fill method. And then over here, which I think is pretty cool, it will actually show you, what your exposures are in your individual entries, which because I filled with rank here, it looks a little different, right? I'm a little bit more exposed to Trey and Bogdanovich right now, probably because they're in a lot of my first 20 or so lineups. So we're all good to go here now. So once we're ready, we can just click this download. And then we can go download and open DraftKings, which I think is the easiest way to do this. Save the file, and it just takes you straight to the right page, the upload page on DraftKings, and we can go ahead and upload.
So I got a quick question. So like I said, I play cash. Just say that single entry, because this is perfect. You have one entry in the top, 20 entry in the quarter jukebox, and then 150 max. Just say you wanted all your one and single entries, just say that's cash games.
Yep.
And so the type, so when it says cash and GPP, can you just explain? Cause like, obviously right now the rank, like the first lineup's GPP, right now it's filling them all because that's what you told it to do. How would you put that cash there and then kind of go about that way?
Yeah, so I'm only entered in GPPs here for tonight, but we pick up the type of the contest automatically based on your entries file. So hypothetically, let's just do exactly what you said. Let's just say that all of these single entries were your cash contests. So we'll go ahead, we'll do these real quick. And this would come in if you actually, you have your head-to-heads or your 50-50s or whatever, they're actually showing up. They'll show up cash here. And then what you can do is you can actually use this filter up here and filter and say, I only want to mess with cash right now. So you go over here, you click cash, and now only your cash lineups are showing up. You can go into fill contests, and maybe you've got, probably some build that's like, this is my cash build, right? And then you can go in and fill this here and do only cash at once, and then do only your GPPs. And I mean, we pick up satellites, multipliers, different things. So, if you're playing maybe a bunch of satties or qualifiers or things like that, we'll pick that up in the satellites. We're not perfect with kind of trying to figure out exactly what type of contest everything is, especially sometimes if DK has like a weird name for their contest or something like that. Sometimes we'll get it wrong. So always a good idea to just like double check and make sure that these are correct. And if they're not, you could obviously change it manually. So you say, no, that's actually a satellite or whatever here. So
I think I think that's really good. And you walk through the different, you click on the cash, you click on GPP, satellites, whatever it is. And it's a very easy way. It's not going to mess up at all. And it's definitely, when you're crunching CSVs, and we always say like, you should be updating your numbers 6:25 Central Time, locks at 6:30. So I know you guys went over the late swap before, I think on this show, but there's late swap tutorials out there in Sabersim too. The same thing on the entries, but using this, how to fill the contest without having to download CSV, download the DraftKings, copy and paste all that. I think that's very good. So I'm going to start using that too. You explained it well. If anyone has questions about it, obviously you can throw them in, but play. I hope that answered your question. Glad to go over that. I say we get into the League of Legends and NASCAR though. Let's start with League of Legends, because I did dabble a little bit yesterday, the past 2 days over All-Star break. And NASCAR is more like it's kind of like MMA, or not MMA because you can't stack fights. Kind of like golf, where you can just pick any 6 drivers, obviously place differential and stuff like that. Whereas League of Legends, you need more correlation. You can't just pick one guy from every single team and stuff like that. So let's talk about League of Legends, and the floor is yours. Walk us through the new model.
Yeah, cool. So, I mean, you nailed it, right? I mean, high correlation sport, it's not enough to just build lineups based on the average.
I'm gonna interrupt you really quick.
Okay.
Just because Joe Ruff in chat, he said he's a few minutes behind. Can you change the rank fill method from Saber score to projected points? You would do that when you build the 150 lineups, then you would then change Saber score to projected. Then it would give you the top 150 projections, and then you would go to the entries and then do it that way. Is that correct?
Yeah, you got it. So let's do I'll do a quick demo there, and just make sure people know where that is. And And I'll show one other feature while we're doing that too, because I think there's
Sorry to
something
interrupt.
cool. No, it's all good. That's what we're here for. So yeah, so by default, sorting by Saber score. Anytime Saber score comes up, always I think a good opportunity to just kind of define what this is for people that don't know. So what we're doing with Saber score is we're essentially trying to quantify the highest expected value lineups for the contest and the sliders that you used for your build, right? So the same reason we always say that we don't want to just build GPP lineups with average projections, right? We need to find upside. We don't want to necessarily decide what the best lineups in the pool are just by how well they project on average. So that's why we came up with this Saber score thing. If you want to change that, you can go ahead and resort that up here by projected score instead. For basketball, it's actually not really generally going to make a huge difference to your lineups. For different sports. It can, but just kind of resorts them slightly. You get a little bit of a higher projected score at the top.
You'd recommend just changing like the slider variance down a little more than just sorting it by projected, because you still want, like you said, like ownership and like uniqueness and stuff like that. Where Saber score, personally, this is how I approach it. Like if you think you're getting lineups way too contrarian or way more people than you want in your player pool, stuff like that, the lower you, and I know you guys don't recommend to, if you're just hit the buttons, you guys already have that all back tested and stuff for sure. But the lower you put the variance from like 10, if you put it at 5, the projected points median is going to be higher, correct?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I think, there's certainly nothing wrong with changing this to projected score. At the end of the day, we've got a pool of 500 lineups that we feel like they're all viable for this contest. So if you say, I want to use the ones that are projected a little bit higher at the mean average, that's fine. And especially for a sport, I would be cautious, changing this to projected score on a sport like, even football or baseball, or these sports where correlation is a lot more important, because you're going to then kind of devalue that a little bit in your build. But yeah, so we can go ahead. We'll just click save here. Now that we've sorted this by projected score, and this is going to say, okay, we've got a different set of 150 now. One thing that you can do that's kind of cool here is you can actually rename this so you don't get confused later. And we could actually call this proj score sort.
Cool.
Click the little green check mark. And then that makes it super easy when you come back to your entry editor, especially, if you're playing a lot of different contests, if you've done a lot of different builds. There's days, maybe I'm on a couple streams, I've been building lineups all day, and I get to the time where I'm going to like finally enter my contest, and I've got 20 builds, 25 different sets of lineups here. This is now just makes it super easy to say, okay, this was the one I sorted by projected score. You can call it final or whatever you want to call it, just so it's super easy when it comes time to lock. So.
Nice. One other question from Binair, and I think it's a pretty good one. So just say he makes 3 different 50 builds for his 150. So he's making certain groups, certain things like that.
Yeah.
And he wants to upload it into 150 through the Sabersim instead of doing manually through the site. Walk him through that process.
Yeah, so unfortunately, that is one of the limitations at the moment with the way the entry editor is set up. So you can't combine lineups from different builds or sets into one single contest at the moment. So easiest way to do that would be, to just do it manually with the CSVs. Now you could, if you had like 3 different sets of 20, say I had a different set of 20 for all my 20 maxes, you can use this little checkbox and do these one at a time. Just check one of them, fill that with one set of 20, check another, fill that with another set of 20. But if I had 3 different builds of 50 lineups that I wanted to use all for the mini, there's no way to do that, unfortunately, at the moment. But that is something I know that's a popular request. That's something we're planning on adding in the future.
Cool. So. Yeah. So right now being there, I assume that but if you just do the old way, download the CSV for all them, copy and paste, go through the 50, you can do it that way. But perfect. That good question being there. And yeah, a lot of stuff is still being worked on, and which is why I love it. There's always constant. Let you guys listen to feedback, shows like this and stuff like that. So, so far the questions we got answered. If you guys have any, drop them in, but let's get back to the League of Legends and start breaking that down.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So, I think the big thing here, right, is that it's not enough to just build lineups on average projections with League and have success. We need to stack. We want lineups that are correlated, but we also want to find some upside, right? There's going to be, players on teams that are underdogs, right? That on average aren't going to be projected that well, but if the team wins, then they're going to be, they might be optimal, or they might give you some high upside lineups. And, if you're not familiar with League of Legends, if you've never played it before, it's a little bit I mean, any sport, right? Even NASCAR, it's a little bit intimidating to know exactly what to do in a traditional optimizer where you have to go in and set all the rules, all the groups to get lineups that look good. And because we're using simulations here, right? So we're using legitimate sims for league here now. You really don't have to. So I'm going to just, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go in. This is for the LCK LPL slate that I think is tonight now. I'm going to go in and we got a 20 max here, and I'm just going to build lineups without setting a single rule. And we'll go ahead and see what these lineups look like. I think it's really powerful here that you get the opportunity to build lineups that have the right constructions right off the bat without having to set a single rule. So then you can spend some time thinking about what you want your strategy to be. I think that's the biggest thing. You know, if you use some of these other tools out there, you're familiar with other optimizers, is most of your time, it ends up feeling like you spend writing the rules to make the optimizer do its job. Yep. Here, you can spend all your time focusing on the strategy on the slate. So let's look at this real quick. And I'm going to just adjust two projections so we can see the lineups. But I'm going to just hop right over to stack types, right? Right off the bat, in this case, for this particular slate, 24 3 stacks. Didn't even have to set a single rule. If we expand this pool a little bit here, right? Let's look at the top 300, right? We look at the stacks that we're getting here, right?
I like that.
Yeah, exactly. So 61% 4-3s, but some 4-2s, a couple 3-3s, right? If you're totally unfamiliar with League of Legends and you haven't played before, it's a high correlation sport where
similar to baseball is how
very similar to baseball. Yeah. So you kind of want those similarly structured stacks, and we've got them here right off the bat. So, you know, instead of figuring out how you're going to set all the rules to get the lineups the way you want, the lineups are already built. The lineups look good. You've got 500 to play with here, and you can spend your time, making adjustments based on what you want your strategy to be for that particular slate. So, you can come in here and cap your exposure. Maybe one of the things that I've been doing, I think one of the higher value things to do is I've been smoothing out my exposure to some of these top stacks, even some of the really best projected teams, the really heavy favorites. I don't want to be like 100% exposed necessarily. So you can come in here and say, only give me 75% of the top team, maybe 75% max, right? I don't want to be on any team more than 75. And all we're sorting through this pool of 500 lineups that we already know is made the right way. And we're getting the top 20 out of the top.
I love how you get the team stacks and stuff. I love that for even like Showdown NFL. You can see how many 5-1s and stuff like that. I think that's one of the coolest features you guys have. So yeah, League of Legends, and that's really cool. 20 entry max. You didn't change any sliders. We talked about it's all back tested, but that's what I was looking for. 4-3 is the traditional, like optimal kind of build in League of Legends, is because you need less things to go right. You need two teams to win. You have that, you're going to have good scores pretty much regardless. So yeah, I think Captain's in there or in chat. He's our League of Legends guy. He said, you're speaking my language. Think what you explained. I'm not sure there's going to be any questions. I have none, but of course, if you guys have any, spit it out. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited for that. You can be a complete noob, look at the RunPureSports playbook, stuff like that, certain teams they like, just a couple things. And I mean, it spits you out a winning lineup plus EV lineup that has a chance to ship. So,
and that's exactly it. I think the biggest point here is that whether you are an expert in the sport, like you know it like the back of your hand, or you're totally new, you can use this and get an edge out of it, right? If you're a league expert, you watch every game, you follow all the different regions and everything like that, you can spend your time, instead of programming the optimizer to build you the right groups, you can spend your time, thinking about strategy, making adjustments to maybe projections or exposure or whatever.
Overweight on this underdog, underweight on this. Just
exactly
you can do that just in the team stacks. You can do that in the one process before you even get. I mean, there's that's awesome.
But if you're totally new, if you've never played it before, I mean, this was me even just a couple months ago. I'd never played League of Legends before. You can come in here and still build some lineups, get familiar with the sport. I think the hardest thing to get used to when you learn a new sport in DFS normally is figuring out, like, what are the constructions? How do you build good lineups for this sport, regardless of who the players are? And that's the part that we take care of and kind of automate here for you. So.
Perfect. Yeah. 100% League of Legends. I'm excited for that. Like I said, I was dabbling a little over the weekend. I wish I knew this. So awesome stuff. Let's get into NASCAR, because NASCAR is a little different beast. It's not correlation really as much like that. There's more starting position, a lot of stuff like that. I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert or anything like that, but it's kind of like golf, where like 6 random people like Sung Jae Im and Howell have nothing to each other, no correlation, no anti-correlation, stuff like that. If you do MMA, the first fight and the sixth fight mean nothing back and forth to each other. You just don't pick two guys against the same fight or in the same fight because it limits your upside. So talk about the NASCAR a little bit, and I'm excited to see what it does.
Yeah. So let me see, give this a second to load here. I'm going to have to back us up and we'll go back to Daytona because we don't have our projections up for this week yet, but I think, let me just go ahead and do a refresh. I think we got stuck here, but I'll kind of, while it's loading, I'll just kind of talk about it a little bit here as well. So, I mean, yeah, we're actually doing a little bit of research on our end right now on that correlation piece and kind of trying to see, you know, how correlated drivers are, because they are, you know, it's not a team sport. There's not the correlation in the traditional way like there is in baseball or football or something like that. But since everybody's racing on the same track, there is a little bit of correlation. I think ultimately what you really need is you want to build lineups that have a chance of being successful as kind of a complete unit, a lineup that fits a particular script for the way the race could play out. I actually think that the best analogy that I've found to NASCAR as somebody that's also kind of just getting used to it, getting familiar, is NFL Showdown, where you don't really want to build NFL Showdown lineups where you're saying, I just want all the top projected plays, right? You're not building cash lineups to be successful in NFL Showdown. Your lineups need to have a certain game script to them. That's kind of the same thing here with the NASCAR, is that, and it's going to depend on the track, right? Certain tracks, the guys starting at the top, they're going to be able to dominate the whole time. Maybe you only want one of those guys. You can't play three different dominators in the same lineup. Other tracks like the super speedways, like we had last week with Daytona, a lot of times you kind of want to stack the back, right? A lot of the upside for these guys is just starting later in the race. So same deal here, because we're using simulations now to power all of this, we'll have an understanding of the right kind of lineup constructions that make sense for the race without you having to program rules here or anything like that. I think NASCAR on a traditional optimizer is probably one of the biggest, the most heavy groups and rules kind of sports that you can play. You cannot survive in NASCAR without setting groups on a normal tool. That is not the case here, right? We'll go ahead. We'll do the same deal here. I'm just going to go in. We're going to build the top 20 and we'll just see what these look like. Again, this is for Daytona last week.
Yeah,
and
so
we'll just,
like you said, each race, like Daytona, like you want to leave as much salary as possible because the people aren't going to lead a ton of laps, the big one and all that stuff. But your projections, I am assuming race to race, kind of already tell you that. RunPureSports, the playbook, stuff like that, the content in general will tell you that. So when you mix it, like the Sabersim knows what to do, how the projections, the analytics, we tell you, usually they're probably on the same page and you can just very easily bump min max and stuff like that, right?
Yep, exactly. And here we go, right? So, I mean, we've got top lineup here, right? A bunch of racers starting at the back, those high upside place differential racers. Bubba's in here, who I know projected pretty well with the Run Pure projections, right? Similar kind of lineups. Whole bunch of guys from the back. Stenhouse, who was right there for almost basically until the very last lap on Sunday. You know, the right kind of lineup constructions for this particular race without having to set a single rule. We don't have to go in there and group all of our drivers out and say this many from this group, this many from this group. You can, if you are a NASCAR expert, you've got a really good understanding of the sport and you want to go in here and build some groups. Absolutely. But you don't need to by default. You can spend your time, you know, similar deal for me with NASCAR. I like to spend my time kind of managing risk, especially on Daytona. Like, I didn't want a ton of exposure to any one driver. Anybody can wreck and just end the race right there. So I spent my time managing my risk here, adjusting some of these exposures down. And I just knew that, you know, the lineups backing them up here, because they're based on the sims, have the right kind of constructions that fit the race. So I think go ahead.
I was just going to say, you also in step 2, you can set max exposure. You guys have like min salary, max salary, all that. If you know going in, you run it and you're like, I don't want 90% of someone in Daytona or whatever. Like you said before, like let's say 70% max of a certain, like you can easily go do that in step 2. And then you'll make sure the more you tell your build before you get to the whole player pool and stuff like that, the more concise and condensed, and it'll give you what obviously the optimizers do what you tell it to do. So the more things you mess with, then you can get the bigger player pool. Then you mess with stuff more, and the lineups, like sometimes if you don't mess with a lot of stuff, the 1,500 player pool, there might be 300, 400 lineups in there that you have no interest in at all. But you can easily X out players that you know you're never going to play. Change the 70% max so you won't get 100% of anyone, all that stuff. And then your pool will be dialed in the 1,500 lineups you'll like more when you keep messing, when you do less steps in step 3. So just wanted to say, like, Yeah, I 100% mess with min max on step 3 too. But if I know going into something, I don't want more than 70% or whatever it is. That max tool under a step 2 is pretty good.
Yeah, no, that's well said. And that's exactly what we always say is if you know exactly what you want to do beforehand, tell us before we build the lineup so that your pool is more representative of that. I always like to start things off when I'm at any sport, any slate. I'll just do what we call a test build, which is I don't touch anything. I don't change any projections. I don't set any groups or rules or anything like that. And I just see how things are looking. It can kind of give you an idea of what do you actually need to spend your time on in step 1. But once you know, yeah, good idea always to do that stuff beforehand. So
that's kind of answering going through it. Tom's question, how accurate is Sabersim projections? You can touch on that. I mean, projections are just like projections are a projection. I mean, if you can project Trae Young at 50 today, he can go out and have a 70 piece. He can go out and have a 20 piece. There's always that stuff, but just talk about, because I mean, that's a solid question. Everyone wants to know they're getting good projections, but you can talk on that because I know that can go a lot of different ways, that answer.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, I'll start by saying that we do a lot of back testing, rigorous, analysis of our projections and feel very confident in the average projection. But you nailed it, right? An average projection is just really, it's just a way of visualizing the range of outcomes of a player, right? Like we've got Jokic projected at 63.63 here, right? Middle of the day, 5 hours before the slate locks or whatever. Mm-hmm. All this really is this is saying the average of all of the different outcomes that he can have on the court tonight. And average projections can be useful. There's a place for them. But I think that one of the biggest value adds you get out of using Sabersim at all is that we actually, we're not just all about the average projection. In fact, our goal isn't necessarily just to come up with this. It's to come up with this. So when everybody's obsessed with this number and they're building lineups and trying to figure out what this number is, and you're focused on building lineups that focus on these numbers, that's where you get a huge edge. And that's where you start winning GPPs. Exactly. And I mean, for basketball, players are pretty normally distributed, right? That kind of looks like a bell curve. Let's go back to NASCAR real quick, because I think this is just such a good case study of why average projections in a sport like NASCAR and these higher variance sports just don't really mean very much. Why I think you can get led astray if you're paying too much attention to them. So, best projected driver in the race last week was Hamlin. I think he was a pretty popular play. Projected RunPure 74, right? We had him a lot lower, right? So you might say, why are the average projections off by this much? Well, let's look at his range of outcomes, right?
And I think all the projections, just looking at it really briefly, like RPS projections were way higher in every single guy, it looked like, than Sabersim. So it kind of neutralizes. It doesn't matter if you're projected 800 or 400. It's exactly how relative it is to the other ones. But
right,
yeah, keep going.
No, that's perfect, right? This graph will kind of show you like the average projection almost doesn't matter here, right? You've got his outcomes here where basically he wrecks. Right. This is basically the
didn't he crash on Sunday or was that something else?
Yeah. No, he did. Yeah. So, and took like 60% of the lineups down with him. So these are those outcomes, right? He starts at 30. He's a good driver, probably has a ton of room to make a ton of place differential points, right? Those are these outcomes, right? And then he's got the situations where he wins the race or top 3, right? Like that really high upside. Those are these outcomes. And when you're building lineups with Sabersim, we don't care about this number. We're going to go in and look at individual race simulations and say, okay, well, in this one, Hamlin, picked up 25 spots, has a huge place differential bonus and comes in 5th or something like that. And then you have the one where he comes in 1st, right? Well, he's the only person that can come in 1st. So that affects the projections for that particular sim. So while we take our average projections really seriously, and I think it's important to look at them and make sure that you're on the right track. On most sports, especially if you're playing GPPs, it's more important to look at the full range of outcomes of a particular player or driver or whatever. And that's what we do when you build lineups. That's what the sim variance slider is doing. Is it's saying, how much do you want to value the results of one simulation, right? 10 sim variance is the results of one simulation versus the total average. And that's why you'll see on different sports, right? Basketball might be down here, right? Average projection's a little more important. Don't want to look at necessarily single game outcomes unless you're playing like really big GPPs, right? NASCAR all the way up here. So, but really good question.
Yeah, I mean, your last point's what I thought was the most important. NBA, yes, like that average projection doesn't mean everything, but NBA is easier to project than any other sport. You know where the minutes are going, you know the usage. This guy's out, this guy gets a bump, like all of that. In baseball, Mike Trout can go 0 for 4 any single day, and you're not going to be surprised in the best matchup. NASCAR, Denny Hamlin, the chalk of all chalk, and crash. MMA, Amanda Nunez minus 900 can lose, and you're going to get a bad score. League of Legends, you have a minus 500 lose or whatever. Like, yeah, the plus 300 team and the guys on that team are going to be projected lower because more than likely they're going to lose. And when you lose, you score less. But when you win, that's when you capitalize on the ownership that's very low. You're going to project, they're going to score way higher than their average projection because their average projections are accounting for them losing more than they are winning. So you have to really understand what projections do in every single sport. NBA by far the one that projects the best, but yeah, everyone in the industry. I mean, it's 2022. We're not back in 2016 when there's no projections. And yeah, you could run the average projection and feel really good about building GPP lineups with that. Now you got to look in the game theory, a game script, getting the ceiling games and stuff, and that's what the Sabersim has back tested and gives you lineups that they think correlate. And they run this, you guys. So yeah, like you talked about it. Talk about it again really quickly though. Like every single sim is like done. Just explain that, because I know there's a lot that goes into like the sims and how are you projecting. Like you're just not building random 7 guys that they're just hitting random things. Like there's certain things that go into football, the game scripts and stuff. So just talk about the background of the sims, what you're doing behind the scenes to give you the lineups.
Yeah. So what we're doing, so for basketball is a good example. So for every single game on the slate, we're simulating the game out play by play thousands of times here. And that basically lets us come up with these ranges of outcomes and correlations for each individual player. So it is literally a play by play sim for basketball. The way it actually kind of like would look if you could watch it would be very similar to like the ESPN Gamecast, like Nikola Jokic hits a 2-point shot assisted by whoever, right? And we're doing that thousands of times for every single game on the slate. And that allows us to kind of capture the variance of these guys on the court, right? Jokic could go out, he could have that ceiling game, he scores 85 points. He could also just have a bad night, not have a really good game, right? But what we're really doing is, because we're doing this so many times, is we can kind of actually pick up how often that happens, right? So we can say, Jokic just has that big, 88-point ceiling game about 6% of the time. And, from there, more than that, maybe another 4 or 5% of the time, he has that big floor game that, maybe you play Jokic. And this is actually something I think this can help kind of alleviate some tilt. If you play a ton of Jokic and he goes out and has like 45 points, you can come in here and it doesn't get your money back, but you can say, hey, I mean, he had, realistically a 10% shot to score less than that or what he scored. Like that happens. That's DFS. And like then, that. Yeah. So we're pulling the simulations here, or we're when we build lineups in the app, we don't use the average projections. We pull from a number of simulations for each individual lineup based on where your sim variance slider is set. So the higher this is, the smaller number of sims we're using for each individual lineup. The lower this is, the more sims we're using for each individual lineup. So, and this changes based on your contest, right? You're playing 500-man single entry, right? You don't need to take on a ton of risk, play super high variance lineups, right? You can play a little bit more closer to the average projections. You're playing, maybe you're playing qualifiers. Maybe you want to go to the live finals, right? That's going to have you play super aggressively, right? Very high ownership fade, but also very high variance. And that's basically a measure of how much we're using the individual sims. I could talk about for different sports, I could kind of talk about individual, like what is actually going into those sims for like an hour. We have some of those videos on our YouTube channel if you want to check them out. But that's kind of the quick overview.
Yeah, perfect. And now something you said is making me question. Dante in chat said, let's say if I'm changing projection for NBA up and down, so he's manually, like AP talks about a lot, BigT talks about a lot, doing their own stuff. Would it be best to lower sim variance sliders on defaults? I said yes, but I might have been wrong. When you were saying, when you change the sim variance, just say 10 to 4, is that not changing like the range of outcomes and making it more toward that average projection that's there? Is that just lowering how many sims that's running and you can still get the 1% and 99th percentile of outcomes still with that? Talk about that, because I thought I knew the answer. I said to lower it because it'll go more based. Like I just thought the range of outcomes would be less. You would never get 1 in 99 the lower you go. But now it sounds like that could be wrong. So talk about that.
I mean, so that's true. So like, let's imagine, like, hypothetically, that you pull a sim where Jokic goes off and he scores 95 points, right? So at 10 sim variants, right? That's the only, that lineup is built on that sim only. So Jokic scores 95, he's 100% going in that lineup, like no doubt, right? If our sim variance is down here at 3, for example, and we still have that sim where Jokic scores 95, it's now in a bucket of a bunch of other different outcomes where he probably scores a lot closer to the mean. So his average projection for that lineup at sim variance 3 is probably still going to be kind of high because there's that 95-point outcome in that bucket, but it's not as big of a factor. It's possible you might have somebody else in the center spot for that particular lineup. So the lower, I'll say a couple things on this. The lower your sim variance slider is, the more you're going to value average projections. But I would really like, I almost never turn sim variance down from what it is at the default, because I think it's at the core of what we're doing here. It's going to be, it's by far the most impactful slider. I really think you're going to be, it doesn't mean you need to go crank it to 10 all the time, but if
it's all back tested. You obviously trust it because you guys put in the hours and hours and hours of stuff, which is why you recommend you don't change the correlation, you don't change the ownership fade, you don't change the variance, because that's where you guys think the sweet spot is on every slate. And that changes the night slate, this many games, all that stuff. So that totally makes sense what you're saying.
Yeah.
It looks like, let's see, any other questions that we're looking at? Tom's got, so Tom mentioned in the NASCAR, because you had to change 2 things. He says, like, do I have to lock 2 NASCAR drivers? No, you just have to make 2 adjustments to your player pool. And I thought you did it like, if someone's Hamlin's 57.1, I'll just say 57.09 or whatever. And then if you go to someone else, I just change a projection by 0.01, 0.02. If you know there's nobody you ever want to play, you can just X them out. And you just need to make 2 adjustments to your player pool. That's a DraftKings rule on a lot of stuff. So, you don't need to lock 2 things in NASCAR. Tom's asking about like strategy in NASCAR. I mean, the Sabersim model has all that. Daytona, you could see they're jamming a lot of people in the back. Certain races, people are going to lead 180 laps out of 200, and you need dominators. So that's where the content at RunPureSports, the Sabersim model in general, there's not just a one right answer, wrong answer to that one. Tom's wondering if you guys will ever have a tiers optimizer for NBA. I know it's not a popular thing. I know the prize pools aren't very big, and all that goes into consideration when you're making it, but is that on the horizon?
It is. Yeah, it's on our list. And the prize pools, I think, are a little smaller contests. I think in sports that are a little higher correlation, it gets kind of interesting. I think football is a pretty interesting contest to play tiers, just because there's, a lot of people that are just going to go in and they're going to click the best projected guy in each tier into your lineups. And it doesn't really account for the correlation there. So I think it's interesting. It's something that we do want to add in the future.
Cool. Yeah. It looks like we got all the questions. If you're watching this on YouTube for free, I mean, first of all, do us a like, hit the like button for us, please. Hit that big red subscribe button too. I assume most of you are subscribed, but if you're not, hit that red subscribe button. You'll get alerts for every time we go live. Jordan and AP do this show 1 p.m. Eastern every Thursday, and you learn new things. I just learned a lot of new things today on this show in 40 minutes. So hit the like button for us, please. Hit the subscribe button for us, please. And if you're not a member and want to be a member, the Sabersim plus RunPureSports package is $150 a month. Usually is $170. And it's like, you need projections, a lot of sports. You can see Jordan, he's doing $20 quarter arcade, the 150 mini max, which I think is a really good conversation. You don't need a huge bankroll, and not saying you do. I'm not trying to come at you or anything.
No, yeah, it's all good.
You know what I'm saying though? Like, you don't need the $15 to max that you max that every day. There's a lot of other ways where you can max out contests on FanDuel, on DraftKings without a bank like that. I mean, I can't be doing that every day. So it's not just for the big players that use optimizers. I think everybody should use projections, should have a model like this, and it does a lot of the work for you. So if you're not a member, if you're a member at just RunPureSports, I think the Sabersim add-on would be very important. If you're not a member at all, Like I said, $150 per month. Get the Sabersim and the RunPureSports package. Jordan, I'm not seeing any other questions. You touched on a lot of the stuff. I know there are League of Legends people in here, Captain, that now I think are going to use this a lot. And I'm excited for it whenever I get in the streets. NASCARs are always popular on Sundays. You guys have MMA, you guys have NBA, NHL, all these other sports you guys have. So the product just keeps getting better. Appreciate your time as always on here. If you have any last words, but it was fun doing the show.
No, yeah, it was great. It always goes fast. I'm already looking forward to next week. So
absolutely. Thanks, Soren, for hopping on. Appreciate all you guys in chat, making it fun. If you have any questions and you're in the RunPureSports Discord, we have a Sabersim spot too, where if you have any questions, you tag the guys, they'll get back to you. Very, very helpful. We appreciate it for sure. Hit the like, hit that subscribe on your way out. $150 a month. We're going to have multiple shows. The bet show with spreads going to be on at 3:30 Eastern. The normal hardwood show is going to be on. The Up to Lock show. Basketball is back. I'm excited, but that's going to do it. Thanks for hanging out with us. Appreciate your help. For Jordan, myself, Title Town, Simon behind the sticks. Good luck, everybody.